Hello, I'm Mary Spicer, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Behind Fashion. In this unprecedented time, the fashion industry, like so many industries, is in distress. Around the world, we are gathering to demand racial and social justice. No industry is exempt, and the hard work must continue. I created this series so that we could support one another as we move forward in this new fashion world. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to introduce you to some of the top people in fashion: producers, directors, designers, models, and so many more. With a virus that discourages the interaction of people and the touching of clothing, what does the future hold for the fashion industry, and how are our roles changing? I look forward to collaborating and sharing our ideas and journeys as we move forward in this new world together. Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce all of you to Christina Neault. Christina Neault attended the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, where she started her fashion career at the Men's Fashion Association and rose to the position of fashion director. After leaving MFA, Christina started working as a consultant, producing television segments, fashion shows, and events for companies like Cotton Inc., NFL, The View, The Today Show, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Swim Association, as well as some like Jockey, Christina. And I found a picture from a Jockey ad, and I think you did an event where this was, I think this was the inspiration for your event.
It was, yes.
I just love the dog.
Yeah.
But I just want everybody to remember Jockey and when they had the fireman. Everybody remembers that ad, and to do an event based on that is just so brilliant. And in 1998, Christina began her association with 7th on 6th, New York Fashion Week, operated by the Council of Fashion Designers of America, known as CFDA, becoming an integral part of the team that brought New York Fashion Week and many of the country's best designers under one roof at Bryant Park. Not one to slow down, in 2002, Ms. Neault joined IMG, which had purchased 7th on 6th, New York Fashion Week from CFDA, and was tasked with launching a centralized fashion week in both LA and Miami. In 2009, Ms. Neault became the executive producer of IMG Fashion and Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, charged with leading the move of Fashion Week from Bryant Park to Lincoln Center. This included overseeing all aspects of production, from construction to the physical complex, negotiating the agreements with the vendors, the mayor's office, the parks department, and NYCHA, which is the New York City Housing Association, and overseeing the execution of over 250 designer runway shows each year. The executive producer of Fashion Week, Christina, represented North America, which included New York, LA, and Miami Fashion Weeks. She was also consulted on Mexico City, Mumbai, Seoul, and Toronto's Fashion Weeks. In 2013, Ms. Neault left IMG Worldwide and became a consultant for companies such as Style Fashion Week as the global fashion consultant, New Wave Swim and the Swim Association of Florida, Pier 59 Studios, and Gen Art. Christina also produces individual fashion shows for designers such as Bipu Mohapatra, Carmen Mark Valvo, Christian Cowan, the China Collective, Dolce & Gabbana, Expo Peru, Harajuku Kids by Gwen Stefani, JD.com, John Paul Adeker, Kenneth Cole, Mansour Gavriel, Moschino, Mouton Cadet, Pandora Jewelry at Coachella with Tracy Reese and Nanette Lepore, Dion Lee, and Zoe Jordan. And I do have a picture. Coachella is so interesting to me, Christina, that at a music festival, there is a fashion portion that is really starting to become a big thing. And you had this fashion show at the Parker Hotel during Coachella.
Exactly. Yeah, with Nanette and Whit and Tracy Reese. And yeah, so there is something about festival dressing.
That's fantastic because it is kind of like a runway. It's I think Bill Cunningham would have really enjoyed seeing it.
He definitely would have enjoyed being there for sure.
What's happening? What are these kids wearing? He always loved that. Oh, but I'm not done. You have also appeared in media such as Boston Magazine, California Apparel News, thefashionlist.com, Fashion Magazine, Fashion Network, Fashion United, Fashion Week Daily. If it has the word fashion in its title, I'm pretty sure you are in it. And so I stopped looking anything fashion. Forbes, Guest of a Guest, The Impression, New York Times, Post Gazette, swimweekcalendar.com, Wall Street Journal, and Women's Wear Daily. You also have an IMDb page because you've appeared in Project Runway and the movie The Tents. And if anybody has missed The Tents as a movie, I think it's very interesting to see behind the scenes of Fashion Week. Christina has also been on various panels such as the Event Leadership Institute's Maverick Series, the International Special Events Society, and Gen Art. And one of my favorite interesting things about you is she has rung the NASDAQ bell 3 times. Once with Carmen Mark Balvo, once with Carolina Herrera. And for anybody on the podcast, I'm showing pictures of her at the NASDAQ with all of these people, a 3rd time with Pier 59 Studios and New York Fashion Week designers. Welcome, Christina, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Behind Fashion.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't give you an A for research.
And I do, because this is our opportunity to let everyone know it wasn't, oh, I like a dress and some makeup, so I got into fashion. There is a lot that goes into it. You're highly skilled. Many of the people at Fashion Week are highly skilled unless they're interning or something. So it's not just a simple thing. It really is a big to-do. And, you know, I invited you on because you're an amazing person. You're a mover and a shaker. And I really loved learning even more about you and getting in there. And so, and that you rang the NASDAQ bell. Did you get the mug I sent to you?
I did.
Let's cheers your NASDAQ bell ringing.
Cheers.
And
Thank
all
you.
of your
Thank you for the mug.
and many, many more years.
Thank you.
I mean, honestly, to go through it though is so important because we hear some of these things and it just doesn't quite hit until you start going down the list. And just so everybody knows, that's abridged. That is shortened.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
I'm exhausted thinking about it too. Before we start talking about all things fashion, I do want to check in with you and your family. There is a pandemic, COVID-19. How is everyone doing?
Everyone's doing everything. Everyone's fine. My family's fine. We're all either here in New York State or in Connecticut. You know, we had the first 3 months of being the epicenter, but we seem to be a little free and clear right now. We're doing better than the rest of the country, which is unfortunate. But I'm in upstate New York, enjoying the outdoors and the animals and the trees after being 3 months in Queens.
Oh, yeah. And that's pretty scary. I mean, you guys, you got it first, you got it the hardest. It really was something, it's something indescribable, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely indescribable. We lost a few people that we know in fashion, a few of the photographers we lost to COVID. You know, so I think we'll learn more about all that when it's all over, when we can actually celebrate their lives.
Yes, exactly. Well, I did start talking about you in your bio that you started your career at the Men's Fashion Association, MFA, as the fashion director. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I don't really know anything about men's fashion.
Well, let me just backtrack a bit. I basically started it as an intern there.
Oh.
And several years later became, just moved up the ranks. But the Men's Fashion Association was a not-for-profit organization that promoted menswear in America. But you're talking about the 90s, and we basically promoted menswear to consumer newspapers. But back then, every city, every town had a newspaper if they didn't have 2 or 3, and every newspaper had a fashion director, a men's director, a women's director. So we really were feeding them stories for menswear in America. As time went on and we started going a little bit more digital, those newspapers started going away. So it was really, so the organization got smaller and smaller. So we kind of had to pivot to the next thing, or I should say in my career, I had to pivot to the next thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, next you started consulting, right? With companies producing events, television segments, fashion shows. So how do you make the jump to that?
So, I was even in my mid to late 20s. It was a little scary, all of a sudden I was unemployed, but it was a membership organization. We had like 250, 300 members, and I was pretty close to a lot of them, and a lot of them were big companies. And they started hiring me to do events, to do press kits and things like that for them. And that's how I started working with Jockey, because they were one of our members. I started doing some PR and events for smaller public relations companies, and they were all members of the organization. So it just kind of brought me to the next freelancing, maybe 5 or 6 years of my life. Right. And it was actually a lot of fun.
So I'm sorry, when you were at Men's Fashion Association, were you doing like fashion shows and things then, and then you just continued with them outside of that association?
Sure. So the organization itself did what they called press previews, which were 3-day events. and they did them in April and October, which is when everything went into the stores. So that's why we targeted the newspapers, because they could write about it, and it was about the clothing that was available in the stores at that time.
Right.
So we would do fashion shows, parties. We would do like actual physical press kits in different areas, like all, where we'd actually send out black and white photos to the newspapers, and they would pick them up in their newspapers.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like olden days.
That's a heck of a start.
There was no such thing as digital then.
No, there was not. In 1998, you started your association with 7th on 6th, CFDA, at Bryant Park. And what was your position when you started with them?
I was a venue manager. So basically there would be 3 or 4 different tents that did 20-ish shows in them throughout the 7 days. So I managed the 20 some odd shows that were only in that venue. And normally I was the venue that wasn't attached to Bryant Park, or wasn't an actual physical Bryant Park. So I always did the Altman building, or when we had an event, when we had another venue at Celeste Bartos, which is in the New York Public Library, just adjacent, because I had more of a technical background. So I managed all the lighting and scenery and sound as well for those offsite venues. And I did the tents as well.
Yeah.
And then I went back on board with them full time.
So do you think that technical background came from the MFA, the time with MFA, that you kind of had to learn those things? Or is that from when you were at the Fashion Institute?
No, definitely from MFA. When we were doing fashion shows, I knew nothing about lighting, staging, and sound. So it was just kind of what I picked up. Yeah. And then a lot of the vendors that I used at MFA were also the 7th on 6 CFTA vendors. So they kind of helped me push over to that, and recommended me for that position as well.
That was smart to work with them with MFA, because they already have an understanding of fashion events, how to light the clothing to get the best photo.
Exactly. Because MFA it was around way before 7th on 6 was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're telling them how to do it so that you can get those photos. Again, it wasn't digital. You had to get the shot as it's coming down, or what have you. So yeah, you got to get that lighting right. It's really important.
Very important. Even back then, even more so than now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can always fix it, but now there's so much, I think, digital, that you can't go back and fix every single thing. There's too much to fix. So now it's almost like you have to go back to, you got to get it the first time.
It's a lot of content
I need to post.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's a lot of content. Yeah. Okay. So in 2002, IMG hired you full time, and immediately charged you with launching Fashion Week in both LA and then later Miami Swim. What were your biggest hurdles in LA and then Miami?
Well, I mean, doing anything remotely when your home base is in a different state is difficult. I worked very hard on both of those events to hire locally, mm-hmm. Which was a challenge, because there isn't, in New York, we have a fashion centrals. We have fashion show producers and fashion show lighting and fashion show scenery people and DJs that only do fashion show music. And when you leave here, or, if you leave New York, there isn't that circle of people. So, there was that challenge when we were in LA of really using people that worked in the movies and theater, uh-huh. and that type of thing. So there's a little bit of a learning curve.
It's close, but it is different, right? Between
you make it work. That's what we do in fashion. Is everything's done a little differently when we don't have to worry about sound and things like that on a movie set like you do in fashion. When you have 25 girls backstage yelling and screaming and getting ready, you don't have those issues in movies. So the scenery is made differently and the sound is made differently. So we ended up bringing a few people in just to consult and hired as much local as we could
Mhm.
in both
Right.
scenarios. Miami, we ended up probably in the very end bringing people down from New York, but trying to hire as much local as we
Mhm.
possibly could. The biggest challenge there was the heat, because that
Yes.
event was in July and Miami is very hot in July, and it has a tendency to rain very hard every single afternoon.
Right.
But it was a really fun event. And of course, you don't have your infrastructure of your office down the street. You don't have all your staff there because you can't afford to bring everyone in a small budget for a small event. So it becomes more difficult. But it was a really fun event,
Yeah.
and swimwear, just easy swim, like of doing a fashion show with swimwear. There's not as many fittings, there's not as many alterations. Everyone's in a good mood, the cocktails are flowing, you know.
It is definitely a different scene. I did have the chance to work down there. I do remember a lot of double stick tape and adjusting for the men. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, one of the things that's going on down there is the swim convention.
Hmm.
And did they work with you guys on that, the swim convention? Were you
So
guys part of them or?
the reason we started that event when I was at IMG was because the swimwear convention was in Miami in July every year.
Mm.
It was the largest swim convention in the whole world, actually, and I
Oh,
believe still is. And they weren't doing more of the marketing side. There was a lot of press down there because they have to cover the market anyway. So we wanted to bring a little bit more, marketing and fun to the group. So we didn't really work in conjunction with them. We did the shows. We of course did the shows after the convention was over at 5 o'clock because we don't want to pull people off the selling floor.
right.
Because that's the reason they're there, is to sell bathing suits.
Yeah.
But it was a fun event. And it was during the 2008 recession, and that was the only sector of fashion that was actually going up. Like, I think sales were up like 12 to 15% because people were still buying swimsuits, but they weren't buying luxury goods. So it was this very successful event and
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I remember it had
You
a
were
very
there.
feel than New York. But also, I think the people that you had coming were more on the business side than, like, let's say the designer, or like with the swimwear and the cover-ups. There was a little bit of a learning curve. They didn't seem to know as much about having a fashion show.
Well, and this was a learning curve for me because it wasn't, at the time, I knew Michael Kors and I knew Donna Karan and I knew all those people. But what I didn't realize when I got into swimwear and we started this event, that they have nothing to do with the budgets when it comes to promoting swimwear, because they're all licensing deals.
Oh,
So you're dealing with a licensing company that may make, 4 different brands, and they're not used to marketing, or their marketing is the sales part of it, where they're getting a big suite at the Delano and spending tens of thousands of dollars on entertaining buyers and press and things like that. So it's just a different mindset, and that took a couple of years to actually, for them to understand what we brought to the table, or what fashion shows brought to the table, and being able to service it out to the newspapers,
right.
the photos and that type of thing.
Yeah, it always takes a little bit for the return on investment to show up.
For sure.
Yeah.
And they were smaller events, we had a venue that held 150, and I think the largest was 350, and you're not getting the quantity of press that you get in New York, where you might get 6 people from Vogue. Down there they might have 1 stringer, and then 1 person from Elle that had, so, and we did get a lot of local press, newspapers, Miami Herald, that type of thing. So
Oh, well, continuing on, in 2009, you became the executive producer of New York Fashion Week for IMG. And they tasked you with leading Fashion Week from Bryant Park to Lincoln Center. And I do not envy you on that. We all felt it. It was a bit of a difficult time. It was not an easy transition, but it had to happen because Bryant Park was no longer available to New York Fashion Week. Can you tell me what were the things that changed for Fashion Week with that move from Bryant Park to Lincoln Center?
Well, I mean, I think, everyone's still waxing poetic about Bryant Park and, fashion was dead after that and whatever. Give me a break. Fashion it's been changing ever since then. We unfortunately couldn't do it there anymore because that's a public park and it's a very, very popular public park, thanks to Fashion Week and making it the park it is today. And, so moving it uptown was, we're no longer on the corner of 42nd and 6th. It no longer were you getting people walking down the street from 42nd Street and go, oh my God, it's Fashion Week, let me take a picture. It wasn't that Sex in the City moment that everyone expected. But moving it uptown, we had a much bigger footprint, a much more elevated complex, but we weren't on the street and we fit into Lincoln Center, which I'm still proud of. It was a beautiful space. It fit into one of the most iconic places in New York City. And, they were kind of welcoming to us. There was a lot of hurdles. It was very expensive. It's a little bit off the beaten path. We worked with NYCHA, the New York Housing Authority, because they're on the other side of Lincoln Center, which no one realizes. But we worked well together in hiring and volunteers and mentoring and that type of thing. But it was everyone loved it. No matter what they say now, they loved it. They walked in and it was like being in a cathedral. It was a beautiful space. The actual runway spaces were gorgeous. We had graduated to state-of-the-art LED technology and we had all the bells and whistles and you could just scan your phone to get in the door.
Yep.
And they loved all that. But how people are, when the rose stops blooming, they everything is, they start coming up with problems.
Yeah.
So, we listened to it. It was a great space, but again, it was a park. I left IMG before they left Lincoln Center, but it was a beautiful space. It was very difficult to move that event after 10 years or however many years it had been, 15 years, I don't even know. There was union issues, there was NYCHA issues. They were putting in the new water main that they started in upstate New York in 1976. It hit Lincoln Center the season we moved there. So 40 years, right? So, there was a lot of coordination with a lot of different people that no one knew about. So, but it was an accomplishment.
Wow. That's amazing. And I knew that there was a lot of work and, if we saw you, would be like, well, don't bother her. She's busy. That was an understatement of the year. With COVID-19, the fashion industry has a rare opportunity to take a moment and think about how we can make changes within the fashion industry. This wouldn't be the first time that Fashion Week is making significant changes. 1998 was the year that you started working New York Fashion Week with the Council of Fashion Designers of America in Bryant Park. And that was the last year that Fashion Week was held in October and April. Starting in 1999, the US fashion calendar changed to September and February. Why was that change made to the fashion calendar? And do you think that change is still relevant today?
Well, there's twofold on that. Yes, it was changed in 99 to back to February and September because the American designers were being accused of plagiarizing or copying the European collections. So they wanted to go first. in the fashion scene.
Yeah.
At the time, I think it was the right decision. But, when we're talking, it was, the Calvin Kleins and the Donna Karens and the Oscars and the Carolina Herreras of the world. That was the heyday for that type of clothing. And the Ralph Rucci's and the high-end, more high-end designer.
Right.
We didn't have digital media then either. So, as we ramp up, and now it's 98, 2008, 20 years later, 22 years later, we have social media now. It's, if we're first and we have everyone in the front row and they're taking pictures, and my collection that's not even going to be in the stores till February has been all over social media all through the fall and into the spring. It's cannibalization. We're sick of it before we even see it in a store.
Right.
And then we're delivering it too early. So if we deliver it too early, you can't get a bathing suit in July because it's been on sale in March.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we're discounting. And then you can't get what you want when you need it. So I don't think it's as relevant anymore. And I also don't think we have the same types of designers that are going to be accused of knocking things off.
Yeah. And it also kind of fed into, I know that I'm probably one of the people that goes and shops only when it's on sale because we expect it to go on sale. So why would you buy it full price? Also, it's just the timing I don't think makes sense anymore, and it's feeding into fast fashion. Do you think that's true?
Well, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, no one buys anything full price anymore. I mean, half the things go on sale before they even hit the floor. They have to put in 20% off because no one's going to buy it if they think it's, even if it's a mental thing, they're not going to pay full price.
Right.
But, I think in 2020 and everything we're going through in this pandemic and sustainability and how we've gone through the last 5 months, and we've seen how much the earth has healed from just slowing down.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's the dolphins in Venice or the air above China or the air in LA or the air in New York or anywhere, that just slowing down and being a little bit more thoughtful about what we're doing and what we're doing to the planet is it's a no-brainer. So we've got to slow down this fast fashion. And do you really need 6 pairs of black pants, or do you really need one that's going to be a really good pair that it's going to save, that you're going to have for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
Especially because we're not leasing a house as much.
Well, hopefully that'll change. But along the lines, thinking of sustainability, many in the industry are taking this moment to discuss sustainability and streamlining processes. What about fashion shows? Do you see a way to make fashion shows more sustainable?
Well, I think that's when we get into what's happening next. So how are we going to make this pivot to what's going to be happening in 2021 and beyond? Is I don't think we're going to be flying all over the place to go to fashion shows. Right. So, but I don't think people are giving up. No one is going to give up a fashion show. The designers are even upset about the fact that they can't show in September because that's their baby. They're presenting to the world. But how do we make that a hybrid of digital versus in person? So that Mary in Boulder can watch my show if she's not here. Right. But I still have my high-end clients. I still have the New York press and so on and so forth. So I think it's going to have to be some sort of pivot. Or you have a stringer in LA or not LA, Paris or Milan or London, because we can't be flying all over the world for this anymore.
So you're going to have fewer people. Are you going to have fewer photographers? Is that what you're saying? Or
I think it's all of it. But I know you and I have talked about. I worked on the Moschino show in December, which was a resort show. They had 150 people, all had a seat, and they had 3 photographers, and that was it.
That's amazing.
But that's a good way to control your content as well. You know what's going out there, you know, who, you know, what those pictures are, what they look like, making sure that the best of the best of the best.
Mhm.
And that's all you really need. If you're
Yeah, they're
controlling.
controlling how you see that brand and what pictures go out.
Exactly. And there was an embargo on all social media and all that. Of course, it was in the subway, so you didn't get any, there was no cell service anyway. But yeah, that was it. And the same thing, we did the Dolce & Gabbana store opening. There was 2 photographers. They control all the content that comes out of those events. And that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and that is fewer people flying around, and a little bit, to some degree, I might miss the pits because they were so very exciting, but
They were challenging.
challenging. As mentioned in your bio, you are the executive producer of New York Fashion Week at Pier 59 Studios.
Mhm.
What is happening for New York Fashion Week this September? Question of the day.
Question of the day. I think it's the question of the last couple of months. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, I can tell you what's happening from my perspective, and the people that I've talked to. You know, I think everyone, a lot of, just like I said before, designers are sad they're not doing shows. They want to do shows. I mean, I want to do shows. That's what I do for a living. But it's kind of socially irresponsible right now. Like,
Mhm.
to bring people, and it's illegal. You can't bring more than 10 people together or whatever it is this week. You know, there's going to be a lot people doing in a showroom showings with smaller groups or one-on-ones like they used to. I think we're not doing any shows at Pier 59. We are doing some digital thing for digital content for designers.
Mhm.
So whether that is computer generated backgrounds with real models and 360s and um, presentations that are digitally presented
Yeah.
for September. And I think the really good thing about that is they can walk away with content to use for the press, for the buyers, for Instagram, for the consumer. So it can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Skinned for
Mhm.
different parts of the industry and released at different times,
Right.
so that you're not oversaturating. There's not too much information out there. So sell it first, know what the buyers bought so that you can promote what they've bought
Right.
to the consumer. And I think we're just doing things a little bit backwards now.
Backwards. Yeah.
Don't promote it to the consumer before you even sold it to a store.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting when you put it that way, that we're doing it. And so I guess we're in for quite a change moving forward. And I look forward to talking to you again, I hope, about everything that's happening and seeing what happens in September.
I think it's going to be, and you know, this is nothing that wasn't happening pre-COVID. But it kind of just pushed it over the edge. And I think that's going to be the silver lining in all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope to see you sooner than later
In person.
in person. Thank
Right?
you so much for coming on.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
And thank all of you for attending this week's Behind Fashion series with my guest, Christina Neault, the consultant and executive producer of New York Fashion Week at Pier 59 Studios. You can find her on Facebook, Christina Neault. Neault is Neault. Facebook is Christina Neault. Twitter at Christina Neault. Instagram, CDN32. Next week, I will go behind fashion with sound designer, audio engineer, music producer, and composer at Rocky Mountain Recorders, Tyler Hayden. See you next Wednesday, August 12th, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, and 5 p.m. British Summer Time. All the best to you and yours.